and the omnibus. So I was forced into the Arches when I was a child. And look, it's come back to bite me later on.
I'm awash with the stuff.
The Archers is the world's longest-running radio show, with more than 15,000 episodes broadcast. Despite being a rural flavour show, The Archers is recorded in the heart of...
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We've got some really interesting source material today. It's from a long-running radio drama, giving us a peek into farming life.
That's right, and we're focusing on one specific event from it, an open farm Sunday held at Brookfield Farm.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive, we want to use these excerpts to explore what really goes into opening a farm to the public. The challenges, the realities.
The unexpected stuff, too.
Yeah.
What can you actually learn about, say, public perception, community engagement, how people connect with food, just from this one day?
Exactly. We'll trace the day through the sources, starting with all the prep work.
Which sounds like a lot.
Oh yeah. Then the initial worries when things seemed quiet. We'll look at what they actually showed visitors, hear from the farmers themselves.
And stick around.
Yeah.
Because there's a pretty surprising twist towards the end.
Right, let's dive in. Getting ready for Open Farm Sunday. The sources make it clear this wasn't just, a casual affair.
No, not at all. There was serious planning. Security was a big thing. They even named the people involved. Ed, Will, Rex.
Right, and they were handling traffic marshalling too.
Yep. Which, if you're expecting potentially hundreds of people onto a working farm, that's crucial. Safety, logistics, it's a big deal.
And the sheer range of things they planned for visitors to see and do, it's quite something.
It really is. They were clearly aiming to have something for everyone. You've got trailer tours, which are always popular.
Sure, classic farm day stuff.
Yeah, sheepdog demos too. But then hawks in the milking parlor, that's different.
Definitely catches your attention. And prepping show cattle.
Right, showing that side of things. Plus a refreshments barn, obviously.
Yeah.
And then a whole schedule of specific talks and tours.
Like what?
Well, the sources mention cheese talks, a talk from the goat gym carer.
Goat gym carer. Okay, I need to know more about that later.
Oh, yeah. Tours of the polytunnels, the edible forest garden. It feels like they really curated it. It wasn't just come look at the farm.
More like an educational experience.
Yeah, exactly. Informative, engaging.
Okay, so they've put in all this work, massive effort, loads of activities, but then the sources shift to the actual start of the day. And it sounds, a bit concerning.
Yeah, that's the impression. The first observation is just low numbers. Surprisingly low.
They mentioned signs, didn't they? Big ones.
Massive signs, apparently. But still, the initial feeling was it was quieter than a regular Sunday. Which, for an open day...
That's not what you want to hear.
Not at all. And you can almost hear them in the sources trying to work out why.
What were the theories floating around?
Well, maybe people just missed the signs, despite how big they were. Seems unlikely, but maybe...
Or the weather. Sometimes good weather can work against you, right?
Exactly. The idea came up, was it too nice? Were people off having barbecues? Or down at the seaside? World Ocean Day was mentioned too, maybe pulling people elsewhere.
But there was another concern, a more specific one.
Yes, and this one feels heavier. There was real worry about a past sewage incident and whether the farm was still perceived negatively because of it.
Being labeled the sewage farm.
Exactly. It highlights that concern about public image, How long does something like that stick even after you've sorted the problem?
Yeah, that's tough. And it must have felt even worse when they heard about another local farm, Pip's Place.
Right. Word comes through that Pip's farm is hacked to the rafters. Absolutely packed.
Ouch, that contrast would really sting.
Definitely adds to the frustration. And then Helen calls from Bridge Farm.
Another farm nearby.
Yeah, and she confirms they're quiet too. So maybe it wasn't just Brookfield. Perhaps it was a wider thing affecting some farms that day.
Okay, so a challenging start. But despite the low initial numbers, the sources show they pushed on with the plan, right?
Yeah.
Sharing the farming story.
Oh, absolutely. They got on with it. And we get some really interesting details about the specific interactions and talks they gave.
Like in the milking parlor, what was the focus there?
It seems the big emphasis was on cow welfare, their happiness, explaining how grass quality links to milk quality.
Okay, making that connection.
Yeah, and demonstrating that the milking process itself isn't painful for the cows. Importantly, the sources explicitly mention wanting to show how clean and hygienic everything was after the incident.
So connecting directly back to that earlier worry about perception.
Precisely. using the tour to actively combat that negative image. It's quite strategic, really.
Makes sense. And what about the goat Jim carer? That name is still great.
Yeah, that talk sounds fascinating. We learned about their goats that the kids were born around Easter, so maybe 7 weeks old at the time.
Okay.
They had female goats for milk, but also they'd invested in a male goat, a buck, or billy specifically for meat.
Oh, interesting. Diversifying.
Looks like it. And the plan was to add goat meat to their product range and make it available for delivery via the Bridge app.
Using tech, direct sales. That's very modern farming.
It really is. It shows how farms adapt, find new revenue streams, connect directly, and the sources mention other interactions too.
Like with specific groups.
Yeah, like the Borsich Wildlife Trust. They were interested in farming with nature, so the farmers highlighted their conservation work, wildflower margins, hedgerows, putting up bat and owl boxes.
Right, showing that side of things, that farming isn't just production, it's land management too.
Exactly. And even simpler things like gently reminding ramblers about litter or keeping dogs under control. Just that everyday interaction with the community.
You get those little specific details too, don't you? The ones that make it real.
Totally. Like the idea of offering sniff samples of silage, which sounds unique.
Huh.
Ew.
An acquired taste or smell.
Perhaps. And describing a prize show cow as the Kim Kardashian of the Hereford cattle world. Do you remember things like that?
You do, it makes it relatable. And of course, you get the minor mishaps.
Oh yeah. Kids getting a bit over-enthusiastic with the silage sniffing or trying to climb on a tractor. Standard farm open day stuff, really? Seems like it became a fairly normal, busy day eventually, despite the slow start.
So, with all that effort and the initial worry about numbers, it must have been playing on their minds. The sources give us insight into David Archer's thoughts, right? The farmer.
They do. It's quite revealing. You really feel the weight of the family effort. He mentions 4 generations being involved.
Who does he name?
Let's see. Ruth, Leonard, Helen, Henry, Mom, Rosie, Ben, and Bess. A whole team. And he points to Rosie specifically as representing the future.
That's quite moving, actually. But you also hear his initial frustration.
Oh, definitely. Especially about the low turnout early on after all the work. There's a line like, it doesn't matter how hard we work, you feel that sense of vulnerability, things outside your control.
But then his reflection goes deeper.
Yeah, it shifts. He acknowledges the tough parts, the freezing mornings, the endless paperwork, even getting peed on by cows.
The glamour of farming.
Right. But despite all that, he talks about appreciating what we have here, the value in the work itself. There's this real tension between the hardship and the underlying passion.
It shows that deep connection farmers often have, doesn't it? Even when it's incredibly difficult.
Absolutely. And hearing positive feedback, like kids saying they want to go into farming, that seemed to genuinely make the effort feel worthwhile for him, even with the earlier quiet spell.
Reinforces the whole point of doing Open Farm Sunday in the first place.
Exactly. Oh, and even while reflecting, he apparently managed to plug their wedding venue business hearing the cattle prep talk.
Haha. Never miss an opportunity. Always the pragmatist.
Always working.
Okay, so we've had the prep, the worry, the hard work, the reflections. And then the narrative and the sources just takes a sharp turn.
It really does. It's quite unexpected after everything that came before.
David takes the megaphone.
Yeah. Maybe fueled by some of that earlier frustration and reflection, he gives this impromptu speech.
What does he say?
He acknowledges the visitors who are there, talks about how demanding farming is, how vulnerable they are to things like bad weather, disease.
Okay, setting the scene.
And he contrasts Brookfield's recent luck, things going relatively okay for them, with other farmers who might be having a much tougher time, sort of putting their own day into perspective.
Right, and
then, almost immediately, the sources describe this sudden flood of cars arriving, like out of nowhere.
Not just one or two.
No, described as being like a convoy. Just streams of cars turning up all at once, completely changing the atmosphere.
Wow. After hours of worrying, it was too quiet. What was the reaction?
Pure shock, it sounds like. Disbelief. From near disappointment to suddenly being overwhelmed with visitors. The word used is a miracle.
A miracle. That's quite a turnaround.
It really underscores how unpredictable these things can be, doesn't it? Public engagement, events,
Yeah.
you just never quite know.
So if we look back at the whole day at Brookfield, as told through these sources, it's quite a roller coaster.
It really is. You start with all that meticulous planning, high hopes.
And then the dip into worry, the speculation, is it the signs, the weather, that old reputation?
Then carrying on, sharing their story. The farmer reflecting deeply on why they do what they do, the hardships and the rewards.
And just when you think the story is about quiet perseverance, boom, the cavalry arrives. Unexpectedly.
Yeah, that sudden shift from feeling like a failure perhaps to this sudden, almost overwhelming success. It's dramatic.
It certainly makes you think, doesn't it? This whole event pivots in moments. What does that tell you about, I don't know, the unpredictable nature of connecting farms with the public? Or maybe all the complex factors, things we see and things we don't, that influence when and why people decide to engage with where their food comes from.
That's a really good question to ponder. What hidden currents led to that sudden influx? Definitely something to you, the listener, to mull over after this deep dive.
So, what are you doing now?
Just getting ready for the next episode. Just moving mics around again.
So, what do you do?
I do the spot effects on the arches. I just
Are you what we call Foley then?
kind of, yeah. That's,
Okay. And these are all part of the paraphernalia of production.
yeah, that's the ball bar.
This one.
Babies so wanted to be in their own place when their baby came. It's due in 2 months. There's not much chance of that now. But I mean, it would have been a stretch for him if I'd actually mind it. Oh, I just wish there was something practical I could do to help him get along.
I think the Archers has had this immense popularity over the years, basically because it has always very accurately reflected the reality of life and living in a rural community at whatever